Second. Tina, welcome to the Z Learning Podcast. Thank you so much for being on.
I'm happy to be here, Zev. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, my pleasure. So as a solopreneur myself, and a lot of people listening to this podcast are also entrepreneurs, solopreneurs, maybe business owners, small business owners, would love to hear your thoughts about building a business to sell. But before we get into that, actually, why don't you share with my audience just a little bit about Tina, your background, and what you do?
Sure. I have an accounting and advisory services firm called TSL Partners, and I really try to focus on helping small businesses, new and emerging, kind of get to that next level. And what we do, how we do that is through really great financial reporting. So you get really great, bookkeeping, financial reporting every month, but then you also get guaranteed strategic advisory hours. So we can really kind of hit right on the head and discuss and strategize and plan. What are my profit drivers? What are my cost drivers? How do I execute? Maybe you have a really, aggressive growth plan. How do we get there? What does it look like? Do you need to get a line of credit and all these things? So what we like to say is we really help catalyze small business growth.
Love it. A lot of what I do as a marketer is I'm helping my clients get more revenue, grow that bottom line. But I think what you're helping them do, if I understand correctly, is really helping them hold more of that revenue, keep more of that revenue and make it more profitable. What is some advice you would advise solopreneurs who want to scale and grow to the next level? They may not even be that profitable yet. Maybe what they're doing is if they have an app or a product that's in development, maybe they have to give a lot of their revenue to contractors or employees and that they're in that scaling up phase. What are a few tips you could suggest to them that over the next few years they can do to become more profitable so they actually get to keep their revenue?
I would say there, thank you for asking that question. It's so wonderful because really the point of all of what I said earlier is really to put more money into the owner's pocket so that you can then grow wealth and then actually come up with what your exit strategy looks like, right? And so to get the most out of your business. So really, the goal here is, you know, you really need a strategic plan, right? So people talk about business plans. How do I start my business? What do I need? But you need to really look beyond that day one when you open. So now what is your strategic plan? Like you should have a forecast. Like what are the milestones you want to meet in terms of revenue? What kind of cost will you incur to reach that revenue? What does year one look like? Year two look like? And ultimately, what is your goal in sales, right? And so do you want to get to a point where you can franchise or whatever the case is? So beyond just coming up with a business plan of saying, hey, I want to start my own bookkeeping service, you need to kind of really come up with a strategic plan that says, okay, well, how do I chase revenue? And if I meet these revenue goals, how much money is it going to cost me, right? What are my true operating, and cost of sales, right? Operating expenses. So I think to really be because it's like if you're going to build a house, what do, right? You take a plan out, you have to build the foundation first and execute upwards, right? Small business, building a small business is exactly like that. You need a plan. So it's not just enough to say, hey, I offer a valuable service or a valuable product. It's what does the outreach look like? And then ultimately, what are my goals? What are the milestones? How do I get there? And I think once you have that kind of focused strategic plan, then you have something to work towards. You can check these things off and say, okay, yep, I did this. I've reached milestone one. Now I need to do these other things to reach milestone two, and so on and so forth.
Awesome. And I think these are really essential tips and strategies for people in the starting up, they should be thinking about. So now let's go maybe into the middle of the life cycle of the business. You've been in business for a few years, you've grown a reputation, you've grown some revenue. Now, what are some things you can do to start closing that gap between the revenue and ultimately the profit that how do you close increase the margins of your business?
And that's a great question, because I think a lot of business owners, because they're managing cash day to day, they're just sort of surviving rather than succeeding. And it's like you could talk to a business owner and they'll say, "Oh no, Tina, this is my most profitable segment of my business." Well, guess what? When you run the numbers, it turns out it's actually your most expensive segment of your business, right?
Mhm.
You see that the dollar sign or the value for that segment is quite high compared to other things, but the cost to generate that $1 of revenue is quite expensive. So my tip is, the best thing you can do for your business from day one is to get a really great bookkeeper, a good bookkeeping service that will give you financials, right? And then maybe at some point when you reach a certain level of profitability, you evolve and you grow into a service like mine, where now you're going to get really rich kind of analysis into what the drivers of those numbers are, right? So now you can actually do like segment reporting, where you can say, "Hey, let's look at just this product, right? Here's the revenue and here's the cost associated." Maybe you're a service oriented, business, and it's head count, right? Do you understand all of your personnel expenses properly, right? So it's those type of things that, people take for granted, because it's like what I say, it's kind of Wizard of the Oz type of stuff. It's
Mhm.
a little intimidating, because they don't teach any of this stuff, in college or high school, like how to run a business, right? And
Which is
so
terrible, I think. I mean, that should be rectified as soon as possible. Or just about personal
totally,
finance, money.
totally, because our economy is supported by, small businesses, and so I think we do a disservice. But it's like we are like, what I like to say is our service is like less than the cost of like a full-time bookkeeper. Like it's a no-brainer. And it really does help. I mean, you look at publicly traded companies like Apple and all these huge businesses, you go look inside their like financial reporting or their analytic group, it's probably the biggest in the whole company, because they're monitoring their margins like to the penny pretty much, right? And so you really do need that financial support to say, "Hey, I need to understand the drivers behind the numbers in my business."
Yeah, for sure. And this podcast, which is mostly, focused on entrepreneurship, sales and marketing, and which are all very important. But I like to have people like you come on and remind people about the importance of the finance aspect, because I think a lot of people get lost in sales and they think they're making big numbers. But what they need is to work with someone like you. Like you said, the business analytics department is bigger at these companies, and for good reason, because yeah, sales is not really a big problem usually for Apple and all those things. It's making more money for themselves and their shareholders. And as you grow, you need an expert like yourself to go through your business analytics and get really granular, which I really appreciate as a digital marketer. We do a lot of granular,
Sure.
data-driven study. But to figure out ways where creative ways where you can trim the fat, ways where you can
Yes,
maybe
operational efficiencies, right? That's
yes,
exactly it, right? And, sorry to interrupt, but, it's like you do so much work for your clients to build that brand awareness. That's why I mentioned those publicly traded companies, right? It's like you said, people are going to line up once you create that brand awareness. That sale part, it comes easier, right?
yes,
And that's great. But then the problem then becomes the owner will say, "You know what, Tina, like we are knocking it out of the park with sales, but for some reason my owner pay hasn't increased at all. What's going on?" Right? So that tells me that there are some expenses or some operational inefficiencies that he or she cannot see, because they're not getting like the financial reporting and the analysis then to support how to make these decisions. And then the other thing I would say too is, kind of what we talked about before is having that focus on a goal, right? Is to say you have a strategic plan. Now you know what to work towards. And so it makes your efforts so much more focused, right? And so you're not just spinning wheels, and because that in itself creates operational inefficiencies, right? Because if the owner isn't sure what strategy to take, to improve profitability or reduce expenses, then again, that's another opportunity for operational inefficiencies, right? And so that really then trickles down through the whole business, right? And so it's really important for the owner to understand, right? Because then it also empowers you to make strategic decisions in a much quicker manner to again reduce those operational inefficiencies.
For sure. And I think it's another reason it's very important to find ways to minimize inefficiencies and reduce spending and maximize profit and profit margin. I think is because you also have to have an eye towards the future, not just today or the quarter or the year, but ultimately, you're going to probably want to sell that business or you're going to want to retire, and ultimately make an exit. So, I'll say on a personal note, when I started my business, I didn't think much about that. I don't think a lot of young entrepreneurs do. I thought a lot about, I love the grind and the slogging it out and the process, and that's
And the
really good.
pride in ownership, right?
Yeah, and it's good to love what you do. It's good to, be to love the process, the journey you need to. But ultimately, once you start thinking in a more high level way about the exit, about building a company that is profitable and sustainable enough that you don't have to be there all the time and you can ultimately sell it if you want to. I actually think it makes you thinking about that future helps you make better decisions in the present and ultimately get better results in the here and now and make more strategic decisions and ultimately I think help you enjoy it more. So if you can, we went through like the beginning, the middle, maybe you could take us home to how should a business prepare uh to sell? Like if you're at that stage where you're thinking about selling your business, what are some tips you can offer?
I mean, honestly, I feel like that exit strategy concept is something that really should be kind of thought about even as you're developing your business, right? Because the idea there is it's like a roadmap. Where am I going, right? Because, you and I, if we're like, hey, Zev, let's go on a road trip, right? Like people want to know, like, should I bring it, like, where are we going? Do I need money for gas, right? So the idea here is I think it really does focus what you're doing and why. It gives you purpose. So some of the things you touched on is like working less hours, things like that. Those are milestones towards your exit. Does that make sense?
Yep.
So I really like to tell owners this is a difference between surviving and succeeding, right? So if you're like managing your cash day to day, you know, um, you can only make plans maybe 30 days out, at a maximum based on your cash flow. That means you're surviving and not succeeding. So you need a plan, right? So we started with the discussion with that strategic plan, but really how that strategic plan finishes, if you will, is your exit. That strategic plan, it is the whole kit and caboodle. It's like what happens on day one and on day exit, right? And the milestones along the way. So I'll just share with you, for me, I want to get to a certain amount in sales per year. So then that way it could command a certain X when I exit, right? And I want, I'm 49, so I want to retire when I'm like, not retire, but I want to move on to Tina 2.0, maybe when I'm 55, right? So I want to sell my business because then I can be an entrepreneur. And instead of having to do all the heavy lifting like I did to build my business, I can just then invest in businesses I believe in, right?
Right.
That might have a social impact I believe in, or something like that. And so, or I can then utilize my services, to help these other small businesses grow, right? And so I think that having an exit strategy is key to any business before you even begin. Because if you don't know what the road looks like, how do you know if you're doing it right or correctly?
100%. And it's really great to, I think having a thought about the end definitely makes you do better now or at the beginning. And yeah, like you said, 2.0, leveling up. I mean, I often think it would be really cool when I have the right client, a client that I really believe in and that we're really aligned and we've built a really strong relationship over the years. I would love to ultimately buy equity in it. And that's an idea. Or ultimately, if I start another business, I could be like the marketing officer, use my marketing skills, marketing strategy to help that grow, or even hold on to the agency, but be more like out of the day to day. There are a number of ways you can go with it, and ultimately, you probably do want. I think treating your business, it might sound a little crass, but I think seeing it as a sellable asset, not just being stuck in the here and now, makes you operate on a whole different level, a much better, more efficient, effective level. And then there's other things, we all have other things. Like you said, you might want to work with a business that advances a cause you believe in. Maybe some of us have other interests. I do marketing, but maybe I want to try real estate. Maybe I want to do more investing. Maybe there's some
Maybe
cool
you want to get
product.
into acting, who knows, right? And the
Exactly.
ideas, I think it really touches to the core of why entrepreneurs start their business, right? It was like I started out in corporate accounting, okay? And it's like they just work you to death. There's no point or purpose other than you're a cog in the wheel, right? And for me, I found that profoundly dissatisfying, right? And so I wanted to kind of take control of my own journey, my own path. If I want to reach for the stars, I'm not going to let anybody stop me, right? So I think at the core of the entrepreneurial spirit is always evolving. Like the status quo is not enough. And so I think that's why it's key for that exit strategy, because even starting your business that might have given us that feel good thing, like we took our destiny into our own hands. But let's be honest, there's a grind to it that's very similar to sort of the trappings of corporate, right? So
Mm.
if you're not always looking up and saying, okay, what does Tina 2.0 look like, and you set that goal for yourself, that's how you really, I feel, in my opinion, how I feel really grounded in the path that I'm on, because it goes back to that entrepreneurial spirit. I want to keep going towards something that's
Mm.
more interesting to me than what I'm doing today, right? So what I'm doing today is just a goal and a milestone for what I want to be doing tomorrow. And so I think that's why that strategic plan, that exit strategy really helps the entrepreneur say, okay, you know what? I'm always wanting to level up. This is what it's going to take, and this is what it looks like, and this is the time frame I'm going to give myself. And then that way you can always feel like you're satiated with that kind of upward look to say, okay, I do have more opportunity to do something else later, right? And so I think that really speaks to that entrepreneurial spirit. We're not happy with just staying where we are, right? We're curious. We want to experience more, right? Like you said earlier, when we were talking before we started the podcast, one of the things you value, right, Zev, is that you get to experience all these different industries, right? Which where you probably wouldn't have been able to in a different version of yourself, right? And so I think that curiosity, that sort of like not wanting to be held, down in terms of how far you want to go, right? Your potential. I think that's why it's so important to have an exit strategy or a larger strategic plan for your business so that you can look forward to something.
I love that. I think you really captured it. You really nailed the psychology of the entrepreneurial spirit, as you called it. And I hope that inspires my listeners, because I know that a lot of people, they think it's about, new uncharted territory, growth, sales. They don't always think about knowing the numbers and the exit in that way. But if you can start to think about your numbers and your exit as sort of like the next phase in growth and opportunity
The
and getting back.
prize.
Yes, the prize and getting back to that core entrepreneurial spirit that made you go off on your own in the first place. We like progress. We like moving forward. That actually is, I've read recently, a core to happiness. That's actually where a lot of happiness comes from. And it's probably why entrepreneurs statistically, even though they don't necessarily make the most, they are generally happier, according to a lot of surveys. So thank you so much. Tina, where could my listeners or viewers find you? Where's the best way to connect with you?
Yeah, so my website is tslpartner.com. There's no S. And yeah, and or I can my email is tina@tslpartner.com, and anyone can reach out to me in case they wanted help. I have once they there should be a link in my website too to book time on my calendar. So, like a free 30-minute, financial review, right? We can talk about kind of things that you're hung up on, where you want to go, tomorrow, and how we can help you, through that journey.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Tina, and hope to have you back on here sometime soon.
Thank you so much, Zeb. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.